Wow, what an amazing number of folks joining us this morning. Good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started right on time because we really have a housing crisis that can't wait in this city. But it's wonderful to see so many familiar faces, so many new faces, HDC members, community members. Some of you are Seattle Levy historians and champions, and some of you are comprehensive plan update advocates in the community. And it's wonderful to see all of you here. Quite an impressive group this morning. I must say that our movement is built upon the diversity of people who are here to move forward the work of changing systems to address the sustained housing crisis that we continue to see in our community. And that means advancing work that can truly change systems, truly change conditions that continue to yield the same outcomes that we've seen here. And I believe that we are at a point where we are truly ready as a collective movement to move the needle on this work. We would like to open this convening this morning by acknowledging first that we are all, wherever we are, on the unceded ancestral land of the Coast Salish peoples. The traditional home of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Squamish, Tulalip, and Makushit nations. We thank these caretakers of this land who've lived and continue to live here since time immemorial. Now with that, I want to move forward and talk about our objective for the day. This is a platform that we've created as HDC. And I realized that I didn't introduce myself earlier. I'm Patience Malaba. I am the executive director here at HDC. And we're providing this platform not only for HDC members in their broad diversity, it is also a platform for community alongside elected officials to have a deep conversation about the work that's ahead of us. We have the Seattle Housing Levy Renewal that is up in 2023. We're beginning to do that work now in order for us to move forward a robust housing levy. If my coffee will allow me this morning, I would say we are pushing for more than $1 billion levy in this renewal, mainly because we know that the need in our community has continued to increase. And we need robust investments to truly address the housing crisis at the scale necessary. We're also going to be talking about the Seattle Comprehensive Plan Update, which we know is another once in a generation opportunity for us to fully plan for affordability through our land use policies in the city. We'll also talk about reducing the cost of production of affordable housing, in particular as it relates to the processes around design review, permitting, and interdepartmental coordination around that work, which we know tends to increase the cost on affordable housing. And we're interested in talking about how do we move forward to exempt affordable housing from design review, because we know it will be an effective approach in moving forward, being able to produce housing at the scale of need. So I do hope that in these conversations, we're really looking more for how do we move forward these solutions. Now I want to step back a little bit and provide some context about these areas of work that we will spend time on. The Seattle Housing Levy has really truly been the heart and soul, the foundational funding for affordable housing in the city, without which we would not have as much affordable housing as we do today. In renewing the levy, we emphasize the importance of that robust investment, recognizing the reality of where we are in terms of economic trends. Where we were in 2016 and the comparison of where we are in 2022, two different places altogether. With COVID-19, I believe the inequities in our systems were laid far much more bare in front of all of us, and we continue to see those manifest themselves. And the other reality alongside that has been that with economic trends, construction costs have skyrocketed, which undermines a lot of the great work that we've done as HDC members, as elected officials, as community members. And it's incumbent upon us as we start this work to really push forward a bold vision of how do we address the affordable housing crisis that is before us with tools that will be effective and can be demonstrated in the outcomes that we see. We know that in the city of Seattle, just in the city, almost 50,000 low-income households are paying more than half of their income towards housing. And in the north of 25,000 people have experienced homelessness. And that number continues to grow. And the Department of Commerce just released numbers projecting what we will need over the next years to 2044. The number is above 100,000 homes. And we know that's just the baseline of what we need because the population growth will continue. I think PSRC released their numbers earlier this year, showing that despite COVID-19 challenges, we continue to grow as a region in terms of population growth and in terms of jobs. So the work of housing people, in particular, low-income people, and disproportionately people of color, is really the challenge that we have in front of us. And I challenge you this morning to use this platform to collaborate, to dig deeper, to co-create a vision of how we get to addressing these challenges. Those of you who are developers know that the past few years, we've passed great tools like the Jumpstart Seattle Fund, a progressive tool that has yielded far much more revenue than was even projected. And it's a tool we've appreciated and will continue to advocate that it is protected. But up against the reality of those great resources and investments from partners like Microsoft and Amazon is this reality of trends where the cost is just undermining the great work that we've continued to do, which is why we need to do far much more at this point with the opportunity we have in the Seattle Housing Levy renewal and expansion. So Jesse will talk you through some of the data which I've referenced in high strokes here. And then he will provide an opportunity for HDC members to come in and talk about their own experiences as housing providers alongside folks who are working in community to highlight the areas of emphasis as we think of the Seattle Housing Levy renewal. And I will say that some of those are really the needs we have in terms of capital funding to continue to produce housing at scale. It's also the reality that as much as we can continue to increase our capital funding, it's important to think of the diminishing trends we see of funding sources that have in the past been points of leverage for projects. We know that with LIHTC at the federal level, we're remaining flat, and we also have tools that may expire by the end of this year if Congress does not act. And we need those tools to be in place, leveraging what we see here locally. But if that is not the case, it means we have to invest far much more robust here as a local city. And third to that, we also know that we need operations and maintenance services to be funded efficiently. And there is a gap there, and there's an equity component of that work. And Alison, alongside Daniel, are going to speak to some of those. We also know that we need people who are doing this work to be paid well, because in many cases, they're also the people who are impacted by the housing crisis. So that's an area that you will also hear our partners really illuminate on as they talk through some of the housing levy programs. And then we'll also hear about affordable home ownership and how with this levy, we can truly advance racial equity goals collectively as a society. With that said, Jesse, I will hand over to you and you will take it away from here.
Great. Jesse Simpson just joined as the Government Relations and Policy Manager here at HDC. I'd like to ground us first off by talking about what is affordable housing. Broadly, it's defined as spending no more than 30% of your income on rent, or housing broadly. People spending more than 30% of income on housing are considered cost burdened, and those spending more than 50% are considered severely cost burdened. People who are cost burdened are basically at much more economic risk of displacement, of eviction, of having one or two things go wrong in their lives and ending up on the street or sleeping on family or friends' couches. Something that grounds all of what we do in the affordable housing sector, from development, operations, data analysis, is this thing called area median income, or AMI. HUD sets this every year for the metro area as a whole. And here you can see what the benchmarks are for what's considered a 30% AMI, or extremely low income, very low income, and merely low income. Overall AMI for Seattle is $134,000 for a family of four. Which, if you compare it against some example jobs here that I've put out, you can see that many of the people who are essential to making our society work are paid less than 50% of area median income. So how do those two things stack up against each other? Well, here I have data on who is severely cost burdened in the city of Seattle and who is moderately cost burdened. As Patience mentioned, we have nearly 50,000 people who are severely housing cost burdened in the city. Bulk of this is people making less than 30% of area median income, and then another 11,000 making 30 to 50% AMI. As you get into the moderate cost burdens, you start to see people further up the income bracket who are renting in market rate apartments or owning homes that they can't quite afford. So what we've seen in this region over the last 10 years has been just a dramatic decrease in the number of homes that are affordable to people making less than 80% of AMI. These figures are for King County as a whole, showing 112,000 affordable homes lost since 2010. And this is, in spite of all of the great work that our members and elected officials have done in terms of developing new affordable housing and expanding resources available for it. Despite all of this, our housing production has simply not kept up with the demand for housing in this city. So what do we do to bend the curve? Patience mentioned that there's a new Department of Commerce figures on projected housing need. Basically, they think that through 2044, King County as a whole needs to build 340,000 homes, predominantly affordable below 80% of area median income. Seattle's preliminary allocation of that is 123,000 homes, with nearly 50,000 affordable at less than 30% AMI, 27,000 at the 30 to 50, 14 at the 50 to 80. And what that would look like is graphed out here, just projecting forward. Basically, we need to bend the curve backwards and really start scaling up the production of affordable housing within the city at the same time working regionally to make sure that the other jurisdictions in King County are at the same time scaling up their affordable housing and housing production more broadly. And something I'll note here, all of these figures are pretty old. They end in 2018. They don't cover anything that we've seen in the crazy 2 years of COVID real estate, with home prices skyrocketing and rental prices also well outpacing incomes. So breaking these figures down into a per year calculation, we need a net addition of over 3,500 affordable homes at less than 80% AMI every year for the next 24. Assuming a capital cost of $350,000 per home, this sums to an annual total capital cost of $1.3 billion, which is a lot of money. But also, I've pulled together all of the information on capital cost flowing into this city. And we are spending a bit over $600 million currently on capital for affordable housing development and acquisitions. Bulk of that is in the 4% low-income housing tax credit, or LIHTC, as well as $150 million from the city, from MHA, Jumpstart, and the housing levy, which has been foundational. On the right here, I've graphed what it would look like if we, in terms of closing that $600 million gap, if we were to quadruple the size of the existing housing levy and go for a $1.2 billion levy renewal. And finally, Patience mentioned a bit of this, but as we're scaling up our housing production, we're dealing with some pretty big headwinds in terms of construction costs, which many of you on this call are extremely aware of. We've seen more than 25% increase in construction costs since the first levy was created, with a 10% increase just in the last year. LIHTC is currently maxed out, and unfortunately, there really are diminishing opportunities for major federal investments in housing. And as she mentioned, the 12.5% LIHTC allocation is set to expire. So overall, how I think about addressing affordable housing needs conceptually is you need 3 pillars. First, more funding for affordable homes and supportive services. Second, you need to allow more homes to be built in more places. And third, we need to build homes faster and more efficiently to make the best use of the public's resources. I'm going to turn it over now to some of our HDC members who can speak at more length about the need for the Seattle Housing Levy to play a role in addressing our region's housing crisis, starting first off with Chris Persons.
Thank you, Jesse, and good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Persons. I'm the CEO of Community Roots Housing. Thanks again to Jesse and Patience for your leadership in HDC. And I also want to thank the elected officials on the call tonight or this morning for your leadership in affordable housing, and also the staff at the Office of Housing, Director Winkler Chin and others. Your partnership in our work is invaluable. And the importance of the city in our work, particularly around LIHTC projects that provide housing for people below 60% of the area median income, it's irreplaceable. And at high cost communities, those projects require public funding, as you know, and it leverages millions in tax credit, housing and debt. And the importance of the levy is paramount. As Patience said, it's the heart and soul of how we create affordable housing for 60% and below in our city. And Seattle is really a leader, a national leader of cities, among cities, in providing support for the development of affordable housing. And one thing that everybody on this call can agree on, without the housing levy, affordable housing development in Seattle will come to a standstill. So it is absolutely vital. But as Patience and Jesse pointed out, the scale of funding is not keeping pace with the need, and the cost is growing faster than ever before. Population growth is going to continue. When I moved here in 2007 with my family, the population of Seattle was 570,000, and now it's 760,000 or something like that. You know, essentially 200,000 more people in the city. We're not keeping pace with the growth. And HDC members have the capacity to do more. Community Roots Housing, for instance, has 4 projects under construction. Right now, we will deliver 526 new homes next year, and we could move more forward if the resources were there. We, as a community of developers, we max out the resources before we max out our capacity. So regardless of other initiatives, support for this well-established group of affordable housing expert developers, owners, and managers has to continue, or the problem will only get worse. And I wholeheartedly agree with Patience. It's time to put forward a $1 billion levy. The data supports it, and the need certainly supports it. Thank you again for your support and for being here today.
Thanks, Chris. And then we're going to turn it over to Susan Boyd to speak about declining leverage as the city funding increases.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, council leaders, and thank you, HDC staff. One of the reasons we need to think about the scale of the levy differently than we have in the past. We have always kind of sized the levy with federal tax credit leverage in mind. And the tax credit program is critical. We continue to use it, but it hasn't, the scale of the credit really hasn't changed much in a very long time. And despite valiant efforts at advocacy by our own delegation here, we just have not been successful in trying to change the scale of the federal tax credit program. So if we are going to address the need here in Seattle, we cannot assume that every dollar of the levy is going to be leveraged with these other federal resources. So when we think about the scale of the levy, we have to know that at least in some of the work that we are doing, the city is going to have to play a much bigger role in supporting projects, and maybe even in some cases the primary role, which just hasn't been the case for most of the development in the past. The other thing I want to say about something we have an opportunity to do that the city has never done before is create a sustainable, reliable, robust resource to support our resident services. The city has funded services for our permanent supportive housing programs, but all of the city's housing portfolio are housing people with fairly serious social needs, and we need more resident services across the city's housing portfolio to ensure housing stability. So creating a part of this levy that is available to support resident services will be incredibly powerful and help us make sure that the housing we do create is a place where people are supported and have stability. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. And now we're going to turn it over to Daniel Malone and Allison Eisinger.
Thanks, Jesse. I'd like to start out by drilling in a little bit more to the specialized type of housing that Susan mentioned, in addition to the broader range of housing that, as she indicated, has needs for additional resident support. Permanent supportive housing is that specialized type of housing which is specifically focused on meeting the needs of people who have experienced long-term homelessness and are living with disabilities. This is a high needs population group that has been quite successful actually in exiting homelessness and remaining housed so long as they have had significant support available to them in the housing units. As a community, we've had some success prioritizing permanent supportive housing, both through the levy and through the state's low-income housing, the State Housing Finance Commission's low-income housing tax credit program. We have had to cobble together, however, from a variety of different sources, the resources needed to provide the on-site supports and sometimes the increased maintenance that these units need, given the characteristics of the people living in them. Permanent supportive housing is successful because it provides a robust array of services that include 24/7 staff support, robust case management services, other support like food in many cases. Again, it's a super successful kind of program, but it requires a significant amount of resource. We've had some success in the last several years getting the state to step in and prioritize resources for operations, maintenance, and services in permanent supportive housing. We hope to sustain that funding from the state, but there is more that's needed at the local level as well there, and that's what we're hoping the new levy is going to be able to provide. One thing that's important to note here is that though this kind of housing is quite successful with people with high needs, it's super difficult work, and it takes a specialized workforce to do that work in the housing, and we need to support that workforce with adequate compensation, with adequate training and support that they need to manage the array of challenging situations that they run into in providing support to this high needs population group. So I'll turn it to Allison to pick up on the workforce issues.
Good morning. Thank you, Daniel, and thanks to all who are participating today with the hope that we are going to move together, as Patience said, boldly to address these issues, because our ability to make progress and to continue to be a leader in our nation, not only in providing local funding for affordable homes, but for the ability to rise to meet the need, really depends on how we address these workforce issues. Once upon a time, not that long ago, when we spoke with elected officials and others about workforce issues, we talked about workforce stabilization. What I want to say in all candor at this point is that we have a workforce who, at this point, as outreach providers, as workers in shelters, in permanent supportive housing, in healthcare settings, and those who are providing other kinds of vital supports to the approximately 40,000 people a year who experience homelessness in our region, they are first responders. They are first responders on the front lines of what was declared an emergency years ago before the pandemic. And they continue to be the first responders on whom we rely to provide not only life-saving services, but life-sustaining and life-enriching services. I wanted to share briefly the latest inflation numbers to go with some of the other figures that we're all digesting here today. The June CPIW figure for the Seattle, Bellevue, Tacoma region was 9.5%. That is a backward-looking number. It is an indicator of just how off, even with our efforts thus far, we have been to keep up with inflation. And that's not even taking into account the need to raise wages for workers in this sector. Thanks to the extraordinary leadership of Councilmember Teresa Mosqueda and the unanimous support of her colleagues, not only did we some years ago pass legislation that would adjust city human services contracts to keep up with inflation, but last year the council added a somewhat extraordinary one-time measure to try to keep up with the extraordinary inflation that folks were experiencing. But even then, we were at just over 5.8%. And inflation was around 8% at that time. What that means is that we're asking people to do essential work. These are folks who cannot work remotely. These are folks who worked without PPE when we didn't have PPE. And these are folks who are the people who help make a difference between housing and a home. And their ability to pay their rent, to pay their childcare costs, to cover the costs of commuting to their workplaces has decreased. So we have an opportunity here, not only in the renewal of the Seattle Housing Levy, but in the renewal of the King County Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services Levy, to ensure that we are stabilizing and enriching this workforce. Because I want to be very clear, what we need is not only to keep people, but to offer them opportunities for professional development as their skills and experience enhance so that they can help to train newer people in this sector, because we need to grow. We need to add homes to meet the need, as Chris and Susan have outlined, and our capacity is constrained not only by the leverage that we have for other funding costs, our capacity is constrained by our ability to staff and maintain excellent staffing at all of our programs. So let's not have this be a constraint. Let's seize this opportunity to really enhance the work that we do and our ability to go further. Thank you so much. I'm turning things back to Jesse, I believe.
Thanks, Allison. We're gonna finish this piece with Daryl from HomeSite to speak about affordable homeownership and racial equity.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Jesse, and thanks to all of you for being here. Again, I'm Daryl Smith. I'm a HDC board member and executive director of HomeSite. We are a longtime CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution. We're a low and moderate income lender for folks that are attempting to build generational wealth here in the city and the region and in the state. We are a home builder, and we do a lot of community development work as well. And I think our last levy provided a lot of success for affordable home ownership, but as many of you know, the last couple of years have been really, really difficult. We've experienced the pandemic, a racial reckoning that have really exposed some staggering disparities in home ownership in this community. And that continues apace right now. As an example, in 2021, HomeSite was able to provide 70 first mortgages for low and moderate income individuals and families, 95 second mortgages. Every one of those deals had several layers of down payment assistance in, which we're very happy about, but only 3 were in the city of Seattle. That's what we're facing. Our purchasers, our families that are attempting to build that generational wealth in a toehold here in our city are chasing a goal which is just outpacing their ability to compete. And it's tragic, really. And we have the backdrop of the fact that Seattle was a formerly redline city. So opportunities to build generational wealth, to have that toehold in the community for your family, for your future, was systematically denied. So we've got a lot of catching up to do here. We need the partnership. We need a larger investment. We have great partners to work with here. I get the pleasure and honor of working with orgs like Habitat for Humanity here, Homestead Community Land Trust, and others that are really providing those affordable home ownership opportunities. But we need everyone's involvement. We like to talk about the continuum of housing, and I really appreciate so many old friends and partners like Allison from Skitch talking about that continuum. Affordable home ownership is part of that continuum. It's not unrelated to the rest of this work. When we can stabilize and create affordable home ownership opportunities and keep people in their homes, we are also involved in anti-foreclosure work across the state and certainly here in our city and region. We keep the housing stock more stable. We don't put additional pressure on rentals because people can't stay in their homes. And by creating those home ownership opportunities, we potentially free up additional units that help the continuum of housing. So affordable home ownership is really part of this story, and the city's investment in it is not just the right thing to do morally because of the history I've talked about, but also it's a doggone good investment. it brings so much more back to the city, not just in tax dollars, but in intangibles as well. So we need to think about affordable homeownership as part of this overall story and its incredible importance. We can and we should and want to do more as an organization and as those affordable homeownership providers. The partners I mentioned do an incredible job. We'd like to do a lot more here in the city, and with your partnership with a larger investment in the levy, we can deliver on that. Thank you very much. Jesse?
Thanks, Daryl. So our focus for today has been very much the levy and funding piece of this, but I want to recognize too that we at the same time need to address our land use. It's only possible even to build affordable housing when you're talking about having multifamily zoning in place. And so HDC is going to be very involved in the comprehensive plan to expand the area in which we can feasibly build affordable housing in the city of Seattle. At the same time, too, we recognize that now with mandatory housing affordability in place, new development within MHA zones brings in dollars for affordable housing directly. And so thinking about this comprehensive plan as an opportunity to dramatically scale up the overall housing production, the resources available for affordable housing, the affordable housing sector, and to more equitably and broadly distribute the growth that Seattle is experiencing. I will also turn this over now to Terry Glennie to speak about the importance of efficiently building homes, of improving permitting processes, and exempting affordable housing from design review.
Hi, and thank you everyone for the time and attention to this issue and to the rest of the leaders on this call. People before me brought up the B word, and this may seem like low-hanging fruit, the things that I'm going to talk about compared to that. But I know that there is a heavy lift involved, and wanted to talk about how important it is for delivering more affordable housing at a lower cost and more quickly. So first, I want to talk a little bit about permitting and express our collective support for the land use permit review process that is currently underway. And specifically wanted to speak a little bit to design review. Unfortunately, design review has had the unintentioned result sometimes of reducing the amount of affordable housing. Also, it often isn't responsive to the specific needs and concerns of providing safe and excellent affordable housing for our families. And then also, it often results in higher development costs. Over the past 2 years, affordable housing has largely been operating in an environment without design review during the emergency legislation, and we have continued to deliver excellent affordable housing under that exemption. So we are asking to consider putting in place a permanent exemption for affordable housing from the design review process. We think, again, that will help deliver more affordable housing at a lower cost and more quickly. Secondly, wanted to speak a little bit about utilities and encouraging streamlining and prioritizing affordable housing with the utilities, particularly during construction. Oftentimes, disruptions during construction can cause tremendous amount of additional costs and delay. And with the urgency of affordable housing, every day a unit is delayed is the day that a family doesn't have a home to move into. We also continue to advocate for considering waivers for hookup and utility fees. Hookups and utilities play a considerable impact on the cost of delivering affordable housing. So we want to continue to support waivers for those fees.
Thanks, Terry.
Again, thank you for the time.
All right, and that brings a close to the HDC staff and member presentation. We're going to turn it over now to Council Member Teresa Mosqueda to speak about her priorities for the levy, as well as anything else she'd like to talk about in the affordable housing sector in Seattle.
Well, thank you so much. I am really excited to be here, and I feel like all of you are probably in the same situation that I am in. We are policy wonks. We love to throw policy sauce all over everything. And once we get one win, it's hard to celebrate that win because we're on to the next thing because there's so much more to do. So I just want to take a quick second to celebrate everything that you all have made possible. This convening, I think if we were in person, we would be, toasting and having some food together and really patting each other on the back for the good work that's been done, and yet at the same time strategizing like we are right now about what's next to do. And so I just wanted to say thank you for convening this and recognize that these are really challenging times, and you all are quite literally on the front line with either frontline workers or providing the frontline response to make sure that we are responding to this pandemic. And as patients noted, so much of this was going on sort of underneath the surface that's just been exposed more in terms of needs in the last few years. So you've been doing this work for a long, long time, and I'm so thankful to be able to be an ally and a partner with you in this work now. I also love that Jesse highlighted the 3 pillars, the 3 circles that we saw. It's not just about money, but it is about money to start with. And then how do we use those dollars, the resources, to change where we can build and to change how we can build? I think that's the value, the power of this levy coming up for us to be able to work together on raising the dollar amounts, tripling the amount of the levy investments to $1.2 billion, and to actually then couple the money with the policy changes that many of you have been demanding for years. I am so thankful that we have been able to make some inroads. I've been on council now for 4.5 years. And in the first 4 years, working in partnership with you all, many of whom have reached out directly, participate in our kind of quarterly meetings that we have for community roundtable housing discussions. If you want to be part of that and you're not, would love to have you, because the policy ideas that we have generated to yield easier process for building housing, especially for those who are rooted in and led by communities at most risk of displacement, have been most affected by the historical racist lending practices and building policies of our city and our nation. You all have said, here's the solutions, and we've been able to advance some of those, which with much more needed. And you've said, thanks for the additional cash, but if we don't make it easier for those BIPOC organizations to actually get the cash and build faster, it's not going to be worth anything, because we need to actually change the policies. That's the value of the housing levy. More funding and better policies to build faster and better, but also to root ourselves in racial and social equity. So I'm thrilled that the housing levy is coming up next year. I know that we're going to have voter support, and I know that we have tremendous wins to point to. And yes, every single resident is also going to see the tremendous need. Those two things coupled together, I think, is going to yield a very successful passage by the voters next November, so that we can have a housing levy that scales up to meet our growing needs for housing and also addresses historic past lending practices, housing investment strategies, so that we can lead with race and social justice at the front end. Over the last few years, working with all of you, just highlighting the amount of money that has gone into building affordable housing, we have taken the affordable housing investments from 52 million right before I came into council in 2016 to now over $200 million in affordable housing in the 2022 budget. And that's just the beginning. This was made possible by $76 million from the mandatory housing affordability payments in last year, and also $97 million in jump Jumpstart. Couple that together, we're at nearly $200 million with additional funding sources that the Office of Housing uses. $200 million. So that's what, 4 times the amount that it was before when I first got into office. And we have been also able to work with the Office of Housing, and so excited that Michael Winkler-Chin is now the Director of Office of Housing. I see you on here, Michael. But the team at Office of Housing has also been able to come up with some creative strategies to say, let us forward commit other funding sources so that we can actually make dollars available when projects are ready. That allowed for us to forward commit dollars in the 2022 budget, and the result has been 5,400 affordable homes under development right now, with 4,000 of those homes coming online this year and next year. There's 17 projects that Jumpstart has also funded. And we're going to have an event hopefully next week for folks who've received funding from the Office of Housing through the Jumpstart Fund to be able to celebrate and to showcase to the community what Jumpstart has been able to do. Investments in projects like the Filipino community, land acquisition to create affordable family-sized housing, the Lehigh Dockside Rapid Acquisition to make sure that we're opening up construction for permanently supportive affordable housing and deeply affordable units, Chief Seattle's Club Sacred Medicine House, 120 units of trauma-informed, culturally appropriate services, including making sure that there's Indigenous community members who are getting priority service in culturally competent ways from trained folks who are directly from the community, create trusted relationships. The SCIPTA PDA North Lot Project, which is 158 units of affordable housing, all partnered around an all-inclusive care service for the elderly through PACE, and it will be owned by the International Community Health Services, space for multicultural childcare through the Jose Marti Childcare Development Center, which is run by El Centro. These are some examples of how it's not just units that are being created when we create more funding. It is actually creating place and community. When we free up additional dollars to braid with other sources like MHA, like Jumpstart, the housing levy can actually create not just units, but a place to call home, a sense of community and true social cohesion when we allow folks to have places to gather and community centers. So I just wanted to thank you all and highlight how the housing levy, in partnership with some of these other funding streams like MHA, like Jumpstart, we mentioned some of the federal and state funding streams as well. All of this has been incredibly important, and yet it's still not enough. The numbers that patients highlighted, that Jesse highlighted at the beginning, all went up to about 2018, 2019, pre-COVID and I think, influx of more people coming to this area seeking to have good jobs, to start their small businesses, either economic refugees, immigrants and refugees. And now we'll probably see more people coming into our region who want a community and a state and a city and county that respects reproductive rights and reproductive justice. So we're going to need to continue to build more housing to meet the scale of need over the years. And just to combat the headline that I saw from the Puget Sound Business Journal the other day, 62% of Jumpstart's funding will continuously go into affordable housing. That ranges between $135 and $170 million just in the upcoming years, going directly into affordable housing just from the Jumpstart. But again, that alone is not enough. So I'm definitely committed to working with all of you to make sure that we are tripling the investment into the affordable housing levy, that we take our message to the voters about what has actually been accomplished in the last few years, and to talk about the growth in need since 2016 when voters passed it. Again, Seattle was the first city to bring forward an affordable housing levy to its voters. It passed with flying colors, and we now have incredible statistics to point to show how well our affordable housing dollars have been used. The Office of Housing, working in partnership with all of you, has been able to exceed its goals established in 2016 and are ahead of schedule. They are delivering 126% of the promised rental units and 115% of the home ownership opportunities already. And there's 2 more years yet to go on the levy. So we're really fortunate to have both a community that had originally recognized the need for affordable housing, passed it on the ballot, and strong stewardship of these public dollars in partnership with all of you to get the funding out. But we need to do more in terms of baking into this levy, the policy changes that I have heard from all of you that we need to make sure that we're expediting the creation of affordable housing, and doing so with race and social justice as our first lens in looking at the funding. So there's a few policy changes that I've heard that I really just want to lift up, and look forward to hearing more from all of you about what other policy changes should be included in the levy. I've heard that you want to make sure that there's more resources available for permanent supportive housing, and the capital and service dollars that Allison spoke to, the service dollars going to the people providing those services, to make sure that people stay housed and that they have the services they need to be treated holistically. We have heard from you that we want to continue to address barriers and increase equity in funding, so that we're investing in community-driven development opportunities to fight displacement and create more resilient communities. That is why we created the Jumpstart Community Self-Determination Fund, which basically means you don't have to have 3 years of trying to build an X number of projects under your belt. You can actually work in partnership with Office of Housing, and they will help provide the technical support. And we will be one of the first lenders instead of the last lender to allow for other people to braid funding so more projects can come online. I've heard that you want to make sure that we are building by acquiring more land, taking them off the private market and putting them into the public hand through Office of Housing, and then in partnership with all of you to make sure that these pieces of properties that go so fast go to nonprofits and to public sector, so that we can actually build the affordable housing we need. And Daryl mentioned the importance of home ownership, using that land for home ownership opportunities, and to really partner with those organizations who are creating first-time home ownership opportunities and doing things within the levy that I'd be interested in to create the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, the Community Opportunity to Purchase Act, policy changes that we've seen in other jurisdictions that we weren't allowed to do 4 years ago when we passed the Notice of Intent to Sell. Not only do we want notice that properties are potentially going to be sold, we want tenants and community organizations like all of yours to be able to have first opportunity to purchase those. And let's bring those properties off the private market. And lastly, just going back to the services, we need to continue to enhance funding going to permanent supportive housing and all of the staff needed there. But over the years, we had not previously funded the non-permanent supportive housing needs. And 2 years ago, we started to do that in the budget. And I was told, you know, if you start to do this, it's going to be an expectation that we may be needing to do this in the future. And I said that there probably should be that expectation. We should be doing more of this. So let's build into the levy how we can support more of the non-PSH supportive housing service elements that are needed to help make sure that folks are stably housed. All of that, of course, is going to require funding, which is why I'm a strong supporter of tripling the investments, and to make sure that, again, we show the country that we can not only pass a levy, but that we can lead on policy strategies with a race and social equity lens to make sure that we fulfill our commitments to build units, but also our commitment to reinvest in communities that were previously harmed by past public policies. We have the public policy torch. We can change that using the pen. And then I will conclude by just saying none of this can be done with the existing land that's currently zoned for multifamily structures. When 75% of our residential land is still currently zoned for single standalone single family units, we have to couple our community organizing, our calls for public action, and our demands for policy change with the comprehensive plan that is also coming up. That is a little bit longer of a time frame, but we all together in 2022 coming up with the community priorities list, 2023 coming up with the policy recommendations, and 2024 passing the comprehensive plan. We have to create the ability for more resilient, affordable community to be able to live in our city by rezoning our city across the board to allow for folks to have access to high opportunity neighborhoods next to childcare and parks and grocery stores, so we can build across this city and really create duplexes, triplexes, apartments, townhomes, multifamily structures like the beautiful one that was just presented when we talked about how we already got rid of the what is it called? The design review components of affordable housing. What you just saw on the screen there was a gorgeous display of what a multifamily structure can look like. We need to do more of that across the city. So I will be really looking forward to partnering with you to highlight all of the important ways that we can, yes, increase funding, but the policy changes that must be embedded within the housing levy, and doing this in conjunction with changing our zoning through the comprehensive plan. Thank you for all the work you've done. And again, if we were together, we would be, I think, celebrating the incredible tenacity of this group and the historic accomplishments that you've made. And yet I think we would be collectively mourning how the impact of COVID has taken us a few steps back in terms of creating the housing stability that we know our community needs, and thus underscoring the importance of passing the housing levy in 2023. And I just thank you all for your partnership and for allowing me to be part of this with you. And let's go pass this housing levy in 2023. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Teresa Mosqueda. Always a pleasure to hear from you about housing priorities. We're going to turn it over now to Christina Custobos from Council Member Lisa Herbold's office.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name is Christina Katsubas. I staff Council Member Herbold on housing, homelessness related issues. I've had the pleasure of working with many of you. I'm bringing greetings, gratitude, and regrets from Council Member Herbold. She's been called to a council meeting this morning and had to leave at 9:30. So apologies you're getting me, and certainly apologize you're getting me in the speaking slot after Council Member Mosqueda, who's such a strong speaker for this work and leader for this work. But here to bring some of Councilmember Herbold's perspectives and thoughts on the levy, the importance of continuing to increase and provide affordable housing. I hope folks know this work is immensely important to her. She's consistently called for doubling the city's investments in affordable housing, and joining Councilmember Mosqueda in some of those celebrations that we have actually done that. And it's exciting that we're on the verge of considering even greater investment. And thanks to all of you for playing such an important role in achieving that milestone. And of course, there's more to do. Some of the Councilmember Herbold's priorities for the next levy package. She's long had an interest in seeing how the city can play an increasing role in removing affordable housing from the speculative market. So hoping to not just continue and refine programs like notice of intent to sell, acquisition and preservation, rapid acquisition, but also to accelerate them so that all already existing affordable housing in Seattle remains affordable and those tenants can stay in their homes. With notice of intent to sell in particular, we have new opportunities to strengthen that regulation thanks to the state Supreme Court's decision in Yim. The changed legal landscape may make it possible to add that right of first refusal or similar policy to strengthen the possibility that tenants remain in their homes. And if we take any of these steps, we have to ensure that resources are available to help the tenants take advantage of those opportunities to buy. We also need to be paying attention to affordable housing that was created with public investment that's nearing the ends of their required affordability terms. We have a number of buildings and units that are currently providing safe, stable, wonderful homes for folks that may be at risk if we are not paying attention to when those units come to the end of their affordability terms. Believe that the Office of Housing should be maintaining a watch list of these properties, and we should make sure that our developers and owners know that the city is here to partner and help preserve those homes. We should have resources available should the developer and city agree that an additional investment would allow the housing to be maintained as affordable. One of the biggest frustrations we hear in our district, which is District 1, West Seattle and South Park, is the lack of local affordable housing, the lack of homes that are affordable in their own neighborhoods. We have a coalition of community organizations that have been advocating for years to attract development to little effect. The Office of Housing's reports show its investments in affordable housing have been concentrated in a handful of areas. And along with the comprehensive plan process, the Office of Housing has pointed to the housing levy renewal as an important opportunity to create a more equitable geographic spread so that residents in all parts of city can find affordable homes in their own neighborhoods without fear of displacement. I want to lift up something that has been mentioned a couple times already, but that the importance of providing that operations and services funding for non-permanent supportive housing units. And I also heard for permanent supportive housing units. Councilmember Herbold did lead the council in adding $1 million for that purpose last year. And then when the Office of Housing received $2.5 million in requests for that 1 million, we added another $1 million. And we've asked the Office of Housing to provide a report on what's driving that need, the projected size, cause, and duration, and identification of potential funding sources to do so. So I hope we'll have a lot more information on that to dig into together very soon. Councilmember Herbold and I have been working with community members in her neighborhood of Highland Park for a couple years now to figure out how to turn a surplus Seattle City Light substation into affordable housing with ground level commercial space for a local small business owner, which has been the community's vision. I want to lift up some language from our new wonderful director, Winkler Chin of the Office of Housing, on the importance of bringing community development lens to housing investments. She wrote, "I see an investment by OH as an invitation to consider other city investments in this place. What else could be there? Childcare, small businesses, other public benefits. Which city departments help inform and support our work? Who do we work with to help do the housing and work?" Councilmember Herbold really appreciates, thank you, Director. Councilmember Herbold really appreciates that thinking and hopes that the levy can make room for partnerships with the Office of Economic Development, for instance, and other partners that can help realize that vision. So thanks for inviting us. Thanks for allowing me to join you in Councilmember Herbold's absence. I want to assure you that I am participating, listening, learning, and taking a lot of notes to take back to the council member on everything we're hearing this morning. And I'm looking forward, and I know Councilmember Herbold is looking forward to working with you over the next year to build a really strong levy package and renew this vision and this agreement with our community. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Christina. I believe we have Dan Strauss on next. Though I saw that he potentially has some committee language he'll have to speak about. I'd also like to flag that we'll have about 15 minutes for questions and answers. And I think we can actually take a bit of time if anyone has a question now. Looks like Strauss needs a couple minutes to finish up some committee business.
I have a question, Jesse. Can we get the PowerPoint that you shared this morning? The data was really helpful, and I know it's much of it is pre-COVID, but that would be very great to have.
Yep, we'll definitely distribute it to all of the attendees after. The baseline housing need figures are pre-COVID, but the projections are quite new and in flux. They're coming from the Department of Commerce directly, and then the county is currently in the process of deciding how it's going to allocate housing need at each AMI level by jurisdiction, which is a political process as well as a technical one.
Absolutely is. And thank you, Jesse, for driving the sessions. And while we wait for Council Member Strauss to join us here, we'll also express great gratitude to the extraordinary leadership of Councilmember Moscator and Councilmember Lisa Herbold, who joined us here. Christina, we really appreciate you being here. I will say a couple of things that I had so we can start hearing from more HDC members and have a conversation. And we'll stop, Jesse, once Councilmember Strauss is back on here. Feel free to chime back in. One thing that was clear, and I think Allison, you said it very well, let's rise to meet the need. And it really goes back to being bolder in this new levy renewal next year. I've heard the tripling, I've had the B word, as Terry calls it, and will continue to emphasize what that B word really is. I had clearly the commitment to be grounded in equity as we renew the levy, and Councilmember Mosquito, you really emphasized that as a goal, and it's truly in alignment with our work here as HDC. I also heard clearly that we cannot assume that the levy dollars will be leveraged. All of us know that the reality of the leverage and funding sources are flattening, and we do need to significantly increase our investments here. So we'll invite HDC members to speak a little bit more to some of what you've seen on the ground. Jesse, I see you're unmuting as Councilmember Strauss back on.
It looks like Marco Lowe is offering to give his piece. I know he has also time constraint. Do you want to go ahead and shift that up?
Let's do that.
Okay. Yeah, let's turn it over to you, Marco.
Okay, I'm here. Looks like I'm unmuted too. I already did a can you hear me and realized I had not unmuted myself, which is less embarrassing unless you tell everybody you just did that. As I normally do coming back to the city, if I see folks I haven't seen for a while, I just want to say hi really quick. First of all, really, if I'm missing a council member, I apologize, but it's always excellent to see housing leaders like Councilmember Mosqueda and soon to be Councilmember Strauss here. Lisa Walters, Daryl Smith, Donald King, Nehemiah, good to see you. We work together at the Master Builders quite a bit. Hey, Kim, I know I owe you an email. So don't forget, I haven't forgotten, I'll try to do that today. And I see Maiko laughing because she sees me do this in every meeting and embarrass myself. So she's just got a list of Marcoisms that she just added a line to, which is great. Anyways, so it's really great to be here today. It's really great to be introduced. My patience, and she took 2 of my classes at SU, and it was so clear then what she was going to be destined to do, and it's so great to see it and work with her. It's a real honor. So, and I'm so glad the HDC made her the ED. I'll dive in. So what I'm going to talk about today is I know I'm being recorded and streamed, and I'll just live with whatever I say and gets passed around. I'm going to couch it though with the speech version of retweets may not be endorsements of my employers, and I can say what I'm going to hope to do, and then what gets done may be different, but I'm going to let you know where we're pushing. I just want to start with, we make it overly hard to build housing in the city of Seattle. We make it even harder to build affordable housing in Seattle. And to quote the great Paul Lambrose, who I think is here, we give all this money to projects and then have these brave, tough, battle-tested affordable housing builders walk down the hall and give it back to us. And I think that is a horrible mistake. And we do it through design review, we do it through permitting delays, we do it through connection fees, and many other myriads of things that this community fights through and continues to, and we make it really hard. There's a voice on Twitter up in Vancouver, I think it's Helen Louis Wilson, who's been writing a lot about affordable housing, and even just this morning about the interest rate hike and what that does to affordable housing. So what are we doing in the Harrell administration? And I would say we've been diving back in, and we've been looking at both the triage situation and also the long-term strategic effort in front of us. On the very lowest end, and let me just back up. I have a portfolio of departments, and 3 of them in this portfolio that most impact your work are SDCI, Seattle Public Utilities, and Seattle City Light. First of all, with SPU, we've immediately started work on the infrastructure question and how we can see projects that are being built in front of a water main, that the main has all the water you need, and you're being asked to replace a main, sometimes not even the main in front of your building. And that can put a project out of market, out of construction, or at incredible cost. We are working to reverse those decisions. Somebody on my staff who has SPU, Liz Van Bemmel, is actually going to every meeting. And I think at least 2 affordable projects have been relieved of that requirement. I don't ever want to know how many have not been relieved of it. Going forward, we're working on truly institutional policy change so that the request isn't to do this in the future and to find other ways to do this. And also for SPU to understand that if a water main was put in 1909 and we haven't replaced it yet, that it is not the most recent housing project's job to replace it when the whole block or blocks will get benefit from it. We are also struggling very much with some of the calculations at Seattle Public Utilities on waste rooms. We have put some really dynamic people on design review, and some of them are not just the really brave live tweeters that went and showed us some of the amazing meetings, but some of the really boring meetings. And we saw a project in the South End that lost 6 units because of a trash room, when an exactly similar building used dumpsters outside and got 6 units. That is unacceptable. And I'm going to be really clear. We have a dynamic new permanent leader at SPU and Andrew Lee that I believe in, period, full stop. This is not a criticism of Andrew. We are working with Andrew. The connection fees are really high. And are there ways for affordable housing? Are there ways that we can get a pool of money? I know the state has one, but it's a little difficult because of the commercial prevailing wage provision. So can our utilities create a pool legally that will allow lower or non-price connection fees? We are working very hard on that. I believe the affordable community is suffering under extremely long connection fees with City Light. I saw a meeting, it was in a meeting this week when it was 78 weeks for a complex new connection. That is longer than it will take to build a building. We have to get that number down. That affects housing and affordable housing. We are working with the utilities. There are many reasons for that. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it delays or stops affordable housing. And I think the utility understands that. And that number will be put on the website so builders know. It's not going to be not known anymore. On the strategic view, we need to have really hard discussions. And this is probably where I am now talking a little, maybe more as Marco Lowe citizen who works for the city, not chief operating officer. We have had a magical time where design review is not applied to affordable projects. Terry, who's on here, I think did some projects. They look great. Design review causes tremendous delay and cost. And as a citizen, I would say I do not know what the benefit is for the cost. And I think we need to have hard discussions on if affordable goes back into design review, or what form, what does design review look like? There is a workforce, a task force right now being done to improve it. I really hope and encourage that comes out with positive results that the community, the affordable and market rate community can support. The delays for permitting, and not just SDCI, we target SDCI all the time. SDCI, SPU, City Light, SDOT, and fire. Those delays are, I mean, I had a developer yesterday tell me he waited 4 years for a permit. I mean, you just can't build. You can't borrow. You can't do anything. And we can't do that. So I am proposing in some fashion like a shot clock, where when the permit is accepted by the city, we have X amount of months with the permit in the city agency's hands to work on it to get it issued. It's harder for me to hold the city accountable if the design teams on the builder side are slow. But I've also been told by a builder when I said that, yes, but do you realize we get instructions from these agencies that sometimes are unclear and it slows down our response? So we need to work on that too. I think we'll be working on, I think at my funeral, there'll probably be notes being passed around by the team on what we need to keep working on. It is a very broad spectrum. It is a cultural question ultimately. When I worked at the master builders, and I really want to thank a lot of folks here like patients and the council members who worked with us, because the master builders did not make it easy to work with them sometimes. When I got there, we did a real shift and hired some great people that prior to me, we had people that were not as amenable to working well, and yet they worked with us. And one thing I learned at the master builders working with other cities is one of the best cities in King County and Snohomish County for building is Auburn. And when you ask Auburn, how do you get these permits through so fast? Their answer is not, here's our lean process, here's our structure, here's the consulting firm that figured it out. The head of the department said, our council and mayor expect us to build housing. So when we touch somebody to slow them down, it really needs to be life safety or major. It's nothing else other than that. We don't go after small things that delay and add around. And so what I hear there is culture. And I'm going to say very clearly, this council has been really hitting on this very hard for a long time. I don't think they've always had the direction from the 7th floor and the mayor's office. And I would say that's true when I was in the mayor's office in two different mayors before Mayor Harrell. Mayor Harrell has been very clear and very pointed with me about how we need to accelerate housing. And that is what I'm held accountable to. So I'm going to close with, it is a really long process that's going to take a long time because cultural change is not flicking a switch. And yet it's really all I think about. And I'll need the pressure and energy and activation of this community to get it through and others. And the more we can work on bringing together the market, the affordable, the towers don't talk to the 6/2s, the 6/2s don't talk to the small scale. I think this community is one of the best on working with people, and HDC is one of the reasons, maybe the main reason why. And again, thank God Patience is there, and thank God Marty before that, and others before him. But the more you work together to push the city and push me, the more I can do. And ultimately, when it's one-offs, it's easy for the bureaucracy to take that meeting and then kind of move on. When it's everybody at the table and all the departments at the table, it's much harder. When everybody sees each other, the lights are on, and the departments understand what they're doing. It's not this one thing they did, but oh, all of us did one thing that month. Then we understand better what our impact is on your work. Because they don't do this overtly. This is not a choice. They are doing what they perceive to be their job. It's just the mayor is now telling them, no, your job is to build housing, not just make sure the water and power flows, and not just sure the permits are processed. They're processed quickly. So I think I'll wrap it up there if that's if that's okay with the HDC.
Well, Marco, thank you. Really for sharing your vision and the work you are doing. We are incredibly lucky to have you in this position. We have been in partnership with you from the Master Builders Association and to this point, and we do look forward to moving change ahead of us here in partnership with our members. Couple of things that I do want to point out and ask for your response while folks are thinking of questions or comments to you is that you're absolutely right in terms of the culture, the organizational culture being a challenge in interdepartmental coordination around permitting and design review. One thing we've asked of you and we've talked to you in previous meetings is convening an affordable housing roundtable where we will talk more in depth about these challenges. Because what I've heard from HDC members is that in some cases, the project has moved so far along and 3 or 5 months later, they're told they have to go back for a specific requirement that was not even raised earlier. And those are challenges that add cost. So just putting a fine point on that roundtable, and Jesse will be following up alongside Hayuk Kim.
Yeah, Hayuk got that. I'm on it. It's been a kind of a crazy week for many reasons, but I saw her name. I just thought it was, ooh, God. Yeah, I got to get back to her. Yeah. And that's good that she's doing her job. No, you're right. And we hear, I mean, we all have probably seen what Maria Barrientos got on Queen Anne for brick texture, and then Lower Queen Anne had that meeting where they wanted brick on the back of the building where nobody could see it. But one of them that has not been administrative design review, which you know, one of the untold stories from Maria Barrientos is she went into the open design review, the main one, to avoid administrative, which is a really damning comment. And did we stop recording? Oh, damn, that red light's still on. But we had an administrative design review on a project. Oh, there's Councilmember Strauss. Good. So I'm going to shut up. But one quick thing, they made a building that was all workforce and had MFTE, and I forget, but they were on-site performance. The design review made them step back the upper floors, so it wiped out the performance. So the building would have to go all top-tier market rate to pencil. Who did we serve? You know, and I had to get in there, but not every builder knows my number. Not every builder can call and scream at me, so I can go scream at somebody else. I don't scream. Even my kids will tell you that, I hope, someday. But that's not, it can't be, I'm here now, I can help one-offs. It's got to be, we systemically have to build housing. And oh my God, you're building an all affordable market rate project next to light rail. Thank you, whoosh, out the door. Yeah. Not, hey, come on back 3 months later, I'm going to take a notch back on that upper 2 floors and wipe out your performa. And everything gets more expensive. And we're going to delay you, so now interest rates are higher, maybe you won't build at all. Yeah. Or concrete, absolutely. Or wood before that, or labor now. We have so many factors that impact housing that we have no control over. Why would we add to that list? For the brave, difficult, scary work that you do every day to house people.
Well said, Marco. And going back to your point on exempting affordable housing from design review, I mean, PSH projects have done this. We've seen them, and they're really fine. So we do need to have a conversation of exempting affordable housing permanently from design review, and we're here to partner with you in moving that work forward. And I'm glad Councilmember Strauss is here as well to speak to some of that work. We're not asking you to tell us what the path will be, but a sense of what the strategies and priorities will be on that work. So Councilmember Strauss, if you're here, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Patience. And thank you everyone for your patience with me being a couple minutes late. I had a bill in committee. Councilmember Herbold spoke and then was able to join committee and asked a whole bunch of questions that were good questions that I then had to answer. So here we are in this virtual world. It's really great. Thank you, Marco, for creating some time for me to get here. What I can tell you is that with our new mayor, Bruce Harrell, government is working. It's working efficiently and effectively in a way that I haven't seen in many years. And it's great to have Marco as a partner. There's a lot of great work that we're getting into. I'm going to just start with some prepared remarks and then I'll take questions. And I want to really highlight that for the first time since the McKinsey report was published, we essentially hit the $200 million investment in affordable housing benchmark this last year. That was due to the housing levy, mandatory housing affordability, jumpstart, and federal funding. The one-time federal funding isn't going to be available to us again in year after year, and our needs are much higher. For us to be successful at meeting our affordable housing needs, we must hit that $200 million benchmark year after year for at least 5 years. And this means that we're going to need to find the means to fill this gap of that one-time federal funding, especially as our needs are greater. The last housing levy was successful only because of this group, because of the advocacy, the unity and voice and support, the storytelling connected to data. And for us to be successful, again, we need you. And we will be relying on you to be bold, exacting, and engaged. One way or another, Seattle is and will continue to grow from a small city, a town that I grew up in, into a large city. We're currently, I believe, the 7th largest city in the nation. That wasn't the case when I was growing up. You all know we're bursting at the seams. And from 2010 to 2020, the population grew by 21%, outpacing the 16% growth from around King County. People from all over the country and the world are drawn here for our walkable neighborhoods, urban living, good jobs, and quality of life connected to the Puget Sound and our mountains. Currently, 46,000 low-income Seattle households pay over half their income for housing. Over half their income for housing. When I was working as staff for the city, I paid over half of my income for a rental apartment that was built in 1962 for the World's Fair. The only thing that was changed was the shag carpet was removed, the appliances were replaced, and the walls were just as hollow as the day it was built. And that was half my income. The city's comprehensive plan calls for an additional 112,000 housing units by 2024 to meet our growth needs, including 55,000 units of affordable to households with incomes below 80% of the median income. What we're calling for is nothing short of a balanced approach to urban transformation for Seattle to grow up, literally just up, because we don't have any more land to go out. Pairing well-designed comprehensive plan update with a robust housing levy is how we grow gracefully into the density and the modern 15-minute city we need to become accessible, to remain livable and reflective of our values, to create a good quality life for everyone, and retaining neighborhood character while we grow up, keeping costs down so that it is affordable, so that when you build housing, we can make sure it remains affordable. That we need to be providing a diversity of housing choices to address our crisis, encouraging greater development of missing middle housing, will take the pressure off of mid-rise development that we see so much of and allow us to have that graceful growth. The missing middle housing also allows for anti-displacement strategies. I know many of my friends' parents live in homes that are too large for them now. I'm sure that many of them would be open and excited to be able to turn one of their floors into a duplex so that they can have income to meet the rising property taxes. But currently that's illegal. It's also important that we are growing this density around bus lines and transit. I was just reading the paper today about 130th station that Council President Juarez has been advocating for, and something that I have supported her in. It's also important to do these things while keeping costs to builders low so that your product is affordable to families, and build in preservation and anti-displacement strategies so we retain and protect the unique character of the neighborhoods we call home. What people, I guess, exempt, there's a lot of wonks in this room. So I guess what many people don't often realize is that our comprehensive plan and our affordable housing investments are our homeless prevention strategies. We have to respond to homelessness at the true scale of the crisis, which means working together and using every tool, dollar, and resource we can find. And I can tell you, as Marco was just saying, funding can't do it all. Design review and permitting backlogs add time we don't have and costs that could build more units we desperately need. And as many of you know, I've already begun working to relieve these issues. And it's great to now have Marco as a partner with the in the city family. He's always been a partner. Design review. Last year, I passed a statement of legislative intent to begin the process to fix design review. Design review currently doesn't have the teeth it needs to keep the character we love, while it also creates unnecessary delay building the housing we need. He just described a case in point example. As the recommendations come from the stakeholders working on the strategies now, we will act as swiftly as possible to retain the benefits and do away with the unnecessary aspects of design review, because we can't have design review holding up the housing we need. This work is underway, and we'll work to relieve the impacts it has on us addressing the housing crisis as fast as possible. Permitting is another one of these necessary processes that hasn't been working fast enough. As you may have seen this last year, I had SDCI and my land use committee to address the choke points of our permitting process. I passed a statement of legislative intent for this issue as well. Candidly, the report I received back missed the mark, and so there's more work to do here. I've already begun working with Director Torkelson to do a few things. Change the goals of SDCI has for how quickly a permit is to be approved from submission. Increase the staffing at review desks that become choke points. For example, as many of you know, some review desks have 20 people and some review desks have 4. When a person is out on a 20-person team, the impact is minimal. And when a person is out on a 4-person team, the impact is incredible. So we need to be able to right-size this using our enterprise funds. For instance, the fire marshal's office right now doesn't have access to enterprise funds that you pay for your permits to make sure that they have the staffing they need. This needs to change. It's also important that we improve the tracking of permits to know when the city is holding up the process. We know that sometimes permit delays are on the shoulders of architects. No one in this room, I'm sure, but we need to make sure that the city is not the one holding up this process. What I know is that we must streamline and hasten the pace of permit delivery. If corrections need to be made, let's make them early and quickly. And if corrections are missed by the city after the first round of corrections, those corrections shouldn't be added at the end of the process unless they're regarding life safety or fire. We can't allow these permitting delays to continue holding us up building the housing we need, because this added time again adds cost that could build units we need and delays the opening of these projects. OPCD Director Kieran Dongo is here. I'm not sure if he spoke before me or after me, but I won't steal their thunder speaking about the scoping process for the environmental review of our major update to the comprehensive plan, as well as alternative growth strategy concepts we'll be studying. The scoping period for the EIS is currently scheduled to, well, it was scheduled for July 25th. It's my understanding that we're pushing it out until the end of August. OPCD has a range of opportunities to provide feedback during scoping period, including a town hall next week, Wednesday, July 19th at 7 p.m. I highly encourage everyone to attend and lend your voice. I guess when I'm speaking about the need for us to build this housing quickly, I'll bring it back to where I began when I was talking about homelessness. When I worked to address homelessness at Ballard Commons and Woodland Park, we were able to get more people into shelter and housing than ever before when removing a homeless encampment. And at Ballard Commons, we brought in 70% of the people residing at the park, And at Woodland, we brought in 89 people, 49 of them in 1 week. It is the highest number of people connected with shelter and housing during an encampment removal in city's history. This was successful because we changed how we engaged with people who were camping, and our success was dependent and due to shelter expansion to be able to bring people inside. With Woodland Park, it took a bit longer because we relied on shelter throughput from shelter beds to permanent supportive or affordable housing. For us to be successful in addressing homelessness, we need more throughput so that one tiny home can help 4 people in a year rather than 2. So that one shelter bed, we're not spending dollars on shelter beds that we could be spending on housing, because we know that when we build housing, we can get people out of shelter. And when we get people out of shelter, we can get more people into shelter. Your work is directly impacting our homelessness crisis, and the city can't be the barrier. And we need you to be engaged, bold, and exacting when it comes to this next housing levy. I'll come back. Sorry, I lost my place because I was going off on a riff. I guess just for us to be successful in addressing homelessness, we need more throughput so that we can move people off the streets directly into permanent supportive housing, and so we can prevent a family from falling into homelessness by reducing their rent burden by living in affordable housing. I'll share with you a bit of personal story, that the neighborhood I grew up in, Ballard, is currently out of reach for the family I grew up in. Both my parents work as social workers. Patients brought up at the outset of this meeting that the people benefiting from the housing you're building are oftentimes the people working to address the multitude of crises we face. And this wouldn't have been possible for the family I grew up in, or I just wouldn't have grown up in Ballard. And I'm proud of the family affordable housing coming to downtown Ballard, across the street from Ballard Commons Park. We've got 80 units of 3-bedroom units. This housing, again, is only possible because of the housing levy, mandatory housing affordability, jumpstart, and one-time federal funding. Without having that federal funding coming to us this next year, we have to be bold, exacting, and engaged as we look to the next housing levy, because we have the opportunity to lead Seattle's transformation, to grow into the city we all know we can be, retain the vibrancy and character, be the accessible, livable, and inclusive city with unique neighborhoods and vibrant public spaces that we're proud to call home. And so that's the end of my prepared remarks. Patients, I am happy to take questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Strauss, and thank you for reiterating the 3 pillars that Jesse opened his presentation with, and I think I had those throughout from all council members. Councilmember Mosqueda emphasized on those, and Christina also did. The aspect of, if we're going to be the city we know we can become, we do need funding for affordable homes alongside supportive services. We also do need to allow more homes in more places in order for us to be able to scale our solutions on affordable housing. And then we need to be able to build faster and more efficiently. And I do want to acknowledge, I saw comments in the chat that we often emphasize SDCI as that one department, but it's been clear even in conversations with Marco that it's not just one department. SDCI has done great work, and Nathan has done great work partnering with affordable housing providers and moving projects forward, and that's truly appreciated. There's a lot more work to be done, and we will allow in-depth conversations at the Affordable Housing Roundtable. So if there are any comments or questions, just one question for Councilmember Strauss. Otherwise, I will thank the council members so we can move along here with the other presentations we have left.
Either I did it very well or very poorly if there's no questions.
I think you did an amazing job. Thank you, Councilmember Strauss, and thank you, Councilmember Mosqueda, for joining us and for staying and truly being a partner with us alongside Councilmember Hibald. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning. With that, we're going to transition over to talking about the Seattle Housing Levy once again. I think I opened saying that the levy is truly the heart and soul and the foundational funding source for affordable housing in our sector. And we have folks who lead this work in developing the program, have been stewarding the levy dollars for more than 40 years now, given the generosity of our voters in our community. keeping this as a traditional commitment to affordable housing. We are incredibly lucky to have Director Winkler Chin joining us with her team here. Kelly Larson is here, and Stephanie Velasco is also here to present to us some of the program formulation and the stakeholder engagement that they've done, and some of their early thinking and back of the napkin calculations that they have. So Michael, over to you and your team.
Thanks, Patience. Hi, everyone. And Stephanie is getting the slide deck up. And the slide deck is, there it is. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I think Patience has touched really on the fact that we at OH view the housing levy is foundational. Oh, there it is. There's a slide. Didn't even know that slide was showing up like that. So it is really it is foundational for us because it is reliable and predictable source of funding for affordable housing development. I don't want people to ever feel that because the voters of the city of Seattle have passed this over the past 40 years that this is a given, right? You can't ever take it this way. Oh, and look at this. Here's a slide of the multiple past levies that we have had. There's the senior housing bond in 1981. I don't remember that. The housing levy in 1986, where we passed a $50 million levy. I do remember the subsequent levies because I'm old like that. So, you know, we are on to our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This will, if we are lucky, be our 7th housing levy, and we are in the middle of planning for that. I think, Stephanie, if you could slide on to the next slide. There we go. And I turn it over, I think, to Kelly.
Thank you, Director Winkler Chin. Nice to see you all. She hates that.
I do. Just Maiko is fine. Nothing happened. I'm just Maiko.
Thanks for having us, everyone. Raise your hand if you've heard this presentation before. It's going to be just completely different this time. We're just going to start with an overview of the 2016 housing levy and then walk through the process that we've done so far. And thank you all for all of your participation and the great comments that we've received. So the 2016 housing levy that we are living through right now has 5 major program areas. Rental production and preservation, which helps to build buildings like you see in the back of this slide. Operating and maintenance supports that support some of those services costs that we've been talking about and hearing about so much, but also just basics of keeping the water running and the lights on. Acquisition and preservation to purchase land and existing structures. We use funding out of the operating and maintenance funds to fund our acquisition and preservation efforts. So we collect 7 years of levy proceeds for the O&M to use over a 20-year period. And we put that resource to good use during the 7 years of the levy for investments in acquisition and preservation. We also have our critical homeownership and home repair programs and the homelessness prevention and housing stability services program. You can see that already through the end of 2021, we have achieved incredible outcomes in this housing levy, exceeding our goals in 3 of our primary program areas. The rental production and preservation program has already produced over its set goal amount. Same with the preservation or the reinvestment strategy. And our homeownership program has already exceeded the targeted goal of serving 280 homeowners. We're really close to fully spending our O&M funding, and we'll likely do that this year. And the homelessness prevention and housing stability services program is on track with where we are in the levy to achieve its goals, right at about 75%, which is where we are right now in the levy cycle. This chart shows another example of these outcomes just to provide actual spending amounts, the commitments, the spending amounts, and the actual goals that have been achieved. So to start with rental production, this is the category we talk about first. It's the largest spending category of the Seattle Housing Levy. We dedicated $201 million to this part of the levy in 2016. We've allocated $152 million. Looks like we're probably going to do more than that this year and get to where we need to be very quick. And currently, as of the end of 2021, we have added 2,700 homes and preserved 445 homes. For the O&M program, we had allocated 42 million. We've already allocated now 35 million of that 42 and attached to 481 homes. So we're providing operating and maintenance support for 481 homes, largely permanent supportive housing. In the homeownership category, we have already overspent, and that's based on some program income and other existing resources. We spent 16 million, so exceeded the amount that was allocated for the levy, and added or maintained 314 homeownership opportunities in our portfolio. And in the acquisition and preservation program, which again borrows money from the O&M program, we have allocated 77 million and been repaid 20 million of that 77 million to add or preserve 1,800 homes in Seattle.
Thanks, Kelly. I'm gonna, let's see, before we go here to the next slide, I'm actually gonna go off script for a second and go back here. Just so all of those numbers that you just heard from Kelly, that's for the 2016 levy alone. And as Maiko talked about earlier, we've been doing, thanks to Seattle voters, have had this really consistent fund source for 40 years. And so this plus also the new local fund sources that we have through Jumpstart, through MHA, and the one-time federal sources that we've heard about throughout this meeting, we've been able to do a lot with you all. I think just in 2021 alone, we were able to serve over 15,000 low-income households in our rental housing portfolio alone. So not even talking about homeownership in that number. But as we've heard many times from patients, from HDC, from all of you as well, we know that the need for affordable housing is greater than ever. So even though we have achieved all of these great things over the past 40 years with this really critical fund source, we know that we need to be doing much, much more. So thank you again, just to all of you here for the work that you are doing in partnership with us. And here now is another way for you to continue to work with us as we plan ahead for the next housing levy in 2023. So many of you have seen this already, but as you know, we started doing stakeholder engagement with many of the people who are on this call earlier this year, starting around January, and you can see the folks that we have been engaging there. Particularly want to call out there these focus groups focused on homeownership, focused on equity investments, and focused on rental housing capital and operations maintenance and services. So we've heard a lot of really good input from you all, some of it that we've heard many times before. So thank you for continuing to bring those messages forward. And as we go through the year, we're going to this summer and fall be broadening our engagement efforts around the housing levy planning process to include the kind of broader community. So again, this is an opportunity that we'll be looking for your all's partnership to make sure that the general public knows about these incredible housing levy outcomes, what we can do when we have this fund source available to us and other local fund sources, what we can really accomplish in terms of providing affordable housing throughout the city. All of that is leading to early in 2023, so the first few months of 2023, the mayor will submit a proposal to council that will include his proposal for the housing levy renewal in 2023. And then if that is passed by council, after, of course, some public process through there, then it will be included on a ballot in 2023. We're going to come back to something that is very similar to this in just a moment. But before we do that, I just want to give you a little bit of a summary of what we've heard so far. And again, that our stakeholder and community engagement processes will continue through this year. But so far, what we have heard from you all is, and we've heard a lot of that today too, which is great. One, we've heard that we need a significant increase in resources in order to meet the need and in order to expand the affordable housing that's available throughout the entire ecosystem. We need to address increasing costs of new development as well as the long-term maintenance needs of our existing portfolio. We've also been engaging both through a specific focus group on equity as well as throughout all of our focus groups, in fact, that we need to look at targeted investments that are going to address equity and provide support for organizations that are really rooted in BIPOC communities. And then lastly, and again, another theme that we've heard here today is that we need to make sure that we are supporting our workforce and helping to provide support for services, as this is really critical to the ongoing operations of our existing portfolio, as well as super necessary if we're going to continue forward creating new affordable housing, new permanent supportive housing. All right. I'm going to leave that there for just a second so you can all kind of soak that in. This is what we've heard from you all. And as we continue going forward, if there are themes that we are not capturing here, please let us know. We'll be engaging you all going through this summer and fall. So here again, very kind of similar diagram as what you saw earlier, but with a little bit more detail here about kind of the touch points or benchmarks that we have along the way in this planning process. So you can see there in winter, spring 2022, we've convened these different focus groups. We are now in the process here in this orange box under summer 2022. The Office of Housing is now kind of compiling all of the information that we've heard from you all, doing some modeling and other kind of assessments to figure out and provide a preliminary kind of proposal, a very early first draft that looks at what the potential for the housing levy size may be, as well as those housing levy programs. That will then be considered by and provided, we'll be providing input on from the Technical Advisory Committee. That as well as the Homeownership Focus Group and the Equity Focus Group will continue to provide really detailed input to the Office of Housing staff through public meetings. So these will be posted on our website and city calendars and elsewhere. So if you are not yet signed up for the Office of Housing's updates, make sure that you get on that list, because we'll be providing or sharing those upcoming dates in the coming weeks and months. The other folks who will be weighing in on the housing levy proposal will be the Housing Levy Oversight Committee, which continues to meet. This is the Housing Levy Oversight Committee that was convened for the 2016 levy. So they continue to kind of monitor the outcomes of the 2016 levy, and will also be looking at the renewal package. And then again, community engagement events that we'll be having this starting this fall and into the rest of the year. So please make sure that you are signed up on the Office of Housing's website for information about those. So again, looking towards the beginning of next year, or end of this year, I should say, and beginning of next year. All of that input and the continued kind of modeling and work of the Office of Housing will then culminate in a final proposal on the housing levy renewal, so the size of the housing levy and those proposed programs that the mayor will then transmit to council in the early part of next year. I'm gonna pause there. We have some other information that we can share with you about what all we've heard from you, more detailed information about that, but would love to just pause here and if there are any questions, or if Patience needs to take the microphone back and keep us moving along, we can leave our time for that too.
Well, thank you, Stephanie, and your team for the work you're doing. I don't see any questions. I do see a comment from Kathleen that talks about another theme that you've clearly had, emphasizing homeownership as part of the programs that will need increase in investments. Anything else that folks would like to raise for the Office of Housing team before we move forward here? Kathleen, would you like to say a few words building on your comment?
Sure, thank you, Patience. And just thank you to everyone on this call. This has been an amazing celebration of what we've done together, and I love the rallying cries for improvement and change going forward. And also want to just thank Stephanie and Kelly for the process on the levy. I think we've had much greater opportunity to talk about affordable homeownership as a part of the housing levy. The housing levy in the past has accomplished its goals, but they were relatively modest goals, so it's not easy to make progress when that's the case. And the work of the Black Homeownership Initiative, the Racial Disparities Task Force at the state level, are important guides in emphasizing the importance from an equity perspective of increasing investments in affordable homeownership. It is the answer to redlining and the discriminatory practices that have kept people from getting affordable housing and having that opportunity to build wealth. So thanks, Patience.
Thank you. And many thanks to the Office of Housing team for the work you're doing, engaging stakeholders and being a partner to HDC. We truly appreciate the work you are doing. I think what's clear as a takeaway here is we will be moving forward the most robust levy. We know that the modest goals from 2016 cannot get us close to addressing the current needs we see in our community. And we are here to partner with you as you do the levy sizing modeling work. HDC members will stay engaged. Our policy advisory group will be digging deeper into a lot of that work. We will have a levy task force within HDC that's also going to be doing internal work as we build up to run the campaign on the levy next year. And that's one point I need to emphasize for the HDC membership broadly. We collectively as an association will have to collaborate to move forward this levy internally and also partnering truly with community as we advance the most robust investments in the next iteration. Now with that, I'm going to move us along and thank all of you for your presentation and for being here and for continuing to partner with us. We do have Michael Hubner from OPCD. Jesse confirmed he is online.
Yes. I am, Patience. Good to see you. Well, hi, everybody.
Thank you, Michael. Let me just provide an introduction. Michael has been a partner at HDC, and we've been talking about the Seattle Comprehensive Plan update. We see this update as that once in a decade opportunity we have. We can't get to 2044 without robust changes in our land use policies, as we've emphasized throughout as a part of the pillar of addressing the affordable housing crisis. And we will be continuing to be in conversations with you. I know you extended just yesterday the comment period on the EIS scoping that we had requested alongside community partners who have been driving this advocacy. And we'd love to hear from you some of the work that's ahead of us and how HDC members can be a part of that work and how community partners can continue to work with us in driving this work. So over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Patience. Hey, just a time check before I get started. You're hoping to wrap up at 11, right?
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna make pretty fast work of this and look forward to opportunities to follow up for sure. I do have slides that I will help us to communicate that information. Let me make sure I minimize this and maximize this and go to my first slide. Apologies for not having this teed up on slide one. So first, let me just introduce myself. I'm Michael Hubner. I'm the Long Range Planning Manager in the Office of Planning and Community Development. And I am managing the comprehensive plan process. And are we at the first slide? This will work here. Great. We have a comprehensive plan in the city. I'm sure that most, if not all of you, are aware that we do this planning, long-range policy planning under the Growth Management Act. The last time we updated our comprehensive plan was the middle of the last decade. Seattle 2035 was that plan. It was adopted in 2 phases in 2015 and 2016. And under state law, we have to adopt a new plan by the end of 2024. At its heart, this is a plan for how we will grow over the next 20 years, out to the middle of the 2040s or so. You know, we take stock of trends, what the data tell us about how the city is changing, the challenges facing in the city, and there are so many, including an ongoing housing affordability and homelessness crisis in the city. We look at projections of growth, and we anticipate that over the next couple of decades, the city is going to be approaching 1 million residents. I think at the start of your meeting, you were talking about how much the city has grown just in the last decade or so. We really anticipate that's going to continue, and planning for the housing we need is so crucial and central to that. And we respond to state and regional requirements. Oh no, turn off my audio. We're going to skip over that slide because it's talking to me. I apologize. I apologize for that. In the interest of time, I'm just going to tell you what I was going to say. So what happens when you have a number of presentations, you mix and match slides, and forget the audio came along with a couple. We have some narrated slideshows that tell a lot about the comp plan that have that audio on our website. I'll give you a link at the end of the presentation. But suffice it to say that what I wanted to emphasize for you there are 2 big points about where HDC could weigh in here. One is with regard to the housing element. So that comprehensive plan has a number of chapters that are topical. We are going to be updating the housing element to reflect new policies, new goals and policies that are responsive to new state requirements in House Bill 1220, which really expands the scope of that chapter to include not only low and moderate income, but also middle income housing opportunities, missing middle housing, and the legacy of racist practices in both public and private real estate. And policy, and also emergency shelter and permanent supportive housing. All of these things are within the scope of the housing element, and there'll be opportunities to weigh in on those new policies in the coming months. The other centerpiece of the plan, and what I would draw your attention to, is what is happening right now in scoping for our EIS. I'm going to do a very quick review of the information out there on scoping, would invite you to, and point you to our website to get more information. But essentially, we are revisiting the city's strategy for accommodating growth, which has been for the past 3 decades based on urban centers and villages. And you can see this map on this slide that shows the centers and villages, which have been where we have planned for the lion's share of our growth, both housing and jobs, in compact, walkable, mixed-use neighborhoods that are linked by transit. Been wildly successful in doing that, in concentrating the growth in those areas, 83% of new housing over the last decade. But there have been growing concerns. We've heard them from community. We see it reflected in our data that an unintended consequence of this strategy is a reinforcement of patterns, historical and current, of segregation and exclusion. The role that the urban villages may play in restricting our housing supply and the diversity of housing types. Most of the housing is going into the centers as smaller apartments, and they're generally fairly expensive, and exacerbating displacement pressures both within some of the villages and outside of them. So with that in mind, we have released for comment a number of alternatives that build on the urban centers and villages, and we'll have a no action alternative, and you can see that schematically represented in this map, but also looking at a number of other additional components of our growth strategy that could address those challenges I just highlighted. One alternative is called focused, where we would be planning for expanded or new full-sized urban villages along with smaller neighborhood nodes with both goods and services that meet people's needs within walking distance of where they live, and also new housing opportunities around some of our existing neighborhood commercial centers. An alternative called broad, which opens up our neighborhood residential areas to more types of housing, such as triplexes, fourplexes, townhomes, perhaps others, across the entire city, where currently it's predominantly detached single-family homes. Corridors approach does a similar thing, but with somewhat more intensive housing types, not only triplexes and fourplexes, perhaps sixplexes or small apartments, and primarily along our transit corridors and around key amenities like parks and, again, those neighborhood commercial centers. And then finally, an alternative, which we're calling combined, and think of this as an all of the above, the nodes, the corridors, the changes to neighborhood residential, And among the alternatives, this alternative would plan for the most housing. And we're very aware of past underproduction of housing in the city and how that has fed into rising rents and prices. We know we have a minimum amount of growth we need to plan for under GMA, but we have latitude to plan for more. And this alternative would do the most to planning for more housing overall, although each of the alternatives does have a different amount of housing that we'll be planning for as we add options for new residential development. Very quickly on displacement, just letting you know that both in how we design the alternatives, how we evaluate them in the EIS, and policies that you will see in the housing element and elsewhere in the plan, it's really intent here is to elevate and scale up and add new tools to our anti-displacement toolbox to support these growth strategies. Our public engagement, apologies for that. Let me just tell you the schedule. As I mentioned, we will be, we're in scoping right now. We launched in the spring. We will be releasing a draft EIS in spring of 2023, as well as a draft plan, and there'll be extensive public comment opportunities after that, those materials are released. We'll be going out into community to talk about implementing zoning later in 2023. And in spring of 2024, the mayor will transmit his recommended plan to council, and we'll release a final EIS. In the very near term, between now and August 22nd, this is the contact information to get comments to us about the scoping. And essentially, we want to hear from you and from others in the community. Are there other ideas of alternatives that we should study? And what should we analyze? What kinds of impacts and benefits should we be identifying in the EIS? And we are going to be looking at housing affordability outcomes and at displacement impacts, but there may be others or more fine-tuned ways of approaching those that you may recommend. And I'm going to stop there. I hope that kept us getting out the door by 11 patients, and I welcome any questions from the folks. And
right on target. Thank you, Michael. And I know that Rico has joined us, and I would love to give a few minutes to Rico to just say a few words before we wrap up here. Rico, over to you.
Patience, thank you. And I'm sorry I wasn't able to join sooner. I was had conflicting meetings as often is the case. So I'm super excited about this work that we're doing in scoping phase for the comp plan. And as you all know, we've extended the comment period from 30 days to 60 days to give people more time to lean in and have their voices heard. Bunch of friends in the room, in the virtual room. It's great to see you all. I think that you're also aware, kind of running parallel to the comp plan, major update. We have also started this housing sub-cabinet with the mayor's office, with Marco Lowe as our executive sponsor, where we are looking at this whole range of what are all the housing types that we need to be creating in order to be a healthy city at all different wages, income levels, diverse communities, leading into the. So there's a lot of work that we are leading into at OBCD to help in that effort. And it dovetails very well with our long-term visioning that is the comp plan. And you're gonna see more of that conversation also present itself as we start to work on sub-area plans as well. So just we're busy, we're growing. We're 46, I think, people today, because we're hiring as quickly as we can. We'll be up at over 50 by the end of the year. Really excited to be doing this work in partnership with all of you.
Well, thank you, Rico. And we do appreciate the intentional approach of recognizing the connection of the comp plan work with other departments and processes within the city. That's truly appreciated. We are well over time here. I know that Allison has a question for you, Michael, if you saw it in the chat and want to speak to that.
I did not see it, but if you could quickly ask it.
Allison, you want to go for your question?
Oh, thank you so much, Patience. I don't mean to take us over, but just generally speaking, I think we are all concerned with housing affordability, but in order to truly address the homelessness crisis as it relates to housing affordability, we need to be ensuring that the EIS specifically looks at affordability for people who are well below 30% AMI. So I'm just interested to hear briefly, Michael, what mechanisms you think exist within the EIS process to ensure that that is specifically called out and not folded into broad affordability.
Right. So first and foremost, that's exactly the kind of comment that we hope to get during scoping. Thank you for that. We do anticipate that we would be looking at affordability, not just broadly, but also within specific income ranges. So the under 30% of AMI is usually the lowest income bracket that we look at. And we realize that it is that income bracket that's most at risk of becoming homelessness if we don't do a good job in providing the housing we need more broadly. So we will be evaluating these alternatives using 0 to 30, 30 to 50, 50 to 80, 80 to 120, looking at all those income ranges.
Thank you, Michael. Rico, I see you have your hand up.
I would say, you know, as you had mentioned, Patience Partnership, we are working with the King County Regional Authority on Homelessness, as well as working very closely with Office of Housing related to what is really the ladder of like housing opportunities. So all the way from, you know, the 4,000 shelter beds that exist now to what is short-term and transitional housing, and then what is housing that actually is 30% income and 60% income that gets people to a place of greater stability over time. So that is part of the work that we are also leaning into in the House of Sub-Cabinet as well.
Well, thank you, Rico, and thank you, Michael. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning, and many thanks to all of you staying well over time. Just as a takeaway from this OPCD presentation, we will have an HDC letter that is being currently coordinated, and Allison would love to include that comment to go beyond just broad affordability and really drill down into the AMIs. So we'll be in touch on that. And we're inviting all of you to sign on to the letter, engage in this process as it starts. I know it's going to be quiet later on in the year, and then there'll be more work to be done as we get into 2023 towards 2024. But as we close, we are all committed to running in partnership a levy that is most robust. And we are looking to you as HDC to partner and lead this work more effectively. And we're looking to community partners to work alongside us in doing that work. We're also looking at the comprehensive plan update as that opportunity to not only ensure that we're allowing housing in all places, but we're really getting to a place where housing affordability is being driven by our land use policies. We're also recognizing that the processes that we have in terms of design review and permitting have been prohibitive in terms of addressing the affordable housing crisis more effectively. So we will be looking to the work that Rico, you're doing on the housing sub-cabinet alongside Marco, and really being partners in elevating what the challenges are, but also co-creating what the solutions can be as we move forward. With that, thank you to all of you, and I wish you all a wonderful day.